I'm a Prajata, founding partner at the Quantum Hub, and we're organizing this series in partnership with Network Capital and The Print. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Jay Panda, who is the National Vice President of BJP. And he is a four-time parliamentarian, twice in Lok Sabha, twice in Rajya Sabha. And Mr. Jay Panda is also one of the first parliamentarians who actually brought the issue of privacy and data regulation to the parliament, way before it became such a hot topic that it is now. We are very glad to have you, Mr. Panda, and thank you so much for giving us the time today. And I just wanted to quickly start with, I think the main issue that is at the heart of non-personal data regulation. In your opinion, who actually owns non-personal data? It's been compared to oil, it's been compared to many natural resources. But in your opinion, do companies own it? Do people who it corresponds to own it? Or is there no clear answer to that?
I think this is arguably the biggest question related to technology and related to the 21st century economy that is currently being debated. It is related, of course, to privacy. But the big question here is modern economies depend enormously on data, whether it's Google or whether it's government collecting data. We have, for our convenience, we have very happily given our data to big tech companies. And for regulatory purposes and governance, government has always collected data. Now, I want to emphasize that here we are talking about raw data and non-personal data. We are not talking about identifiable data of every individual. So for example, my own health records, which identify me, are personal data, and I have certain ownership over it. And nobody, especially a company that wants to monetize it, should have wanton access to that kind of data. So here we are talking about raw data that is not yet processed. And that adds another aspect to it. And the other aspect is that it's about intellectual property rights, about IPR. Now, when you process something and you add something special, obviously you can claim an intellectual property right over that. Now, if you've simply collected it and it's raw data, do you own it, or should the community own it, or should government own it? This is a very valid question. India is at the cutting edge of this debate. And I think this issue, no matter how we decide on this, this matter is going to be discussed around the world for quite some time yet, because the modern economy depends so much on data. I want to conclude my answer to this first question by giving one example from a pre-internet time. And I will use this example repeatedly during the discussion today. So let's think of census. Now, governments have been collecting census data for centuries. Now, the raw data that they collect is, once it's anonymized, it's available to everybody. Now, there are certain marketing companies that have taken census data and have processed it. They have sliced it and diced it and restructured it in a manner that helps them for political campaigns, for consumer goods and services. Now, this is it's an interesting analogy, because can an individual say that, look, the census data cannot be shared without my consent, because even though it is anonymous, even though it is non-personal, I have some stake in it. So I think these are valid questions, and I'll use the census example again and again to illuminate some of the contentious issues about non-personal data.
Great, thanks, Mr. Panda. And I agree. So we've had two discussions before this, yesterday and day before yesterday. A lot of legal experts and technical experts tried to answer this question, but actually there is no real answer. And I think for the world also to be able to answer this, we probably need more deliberation. But I think a question I had is, so you took the example of census data, which is taken by the government and therefore is sort of done for a public purpose in some ways. But when non-personal data is generated through private effort, do you think if we mandatorily have that data be shared, it can distort incentives for innovation?
Okay, I think this is a great question, and this is another of the fundamental issues that is contentious. And this essentially goes to the IPR aspect of the debate that I've been talking about. So let me cite examples where this has been the case earlier. Now, just because you collect something or you build something, is it entirely yours? Now, in a libertarian worldview, yes, there should be no rules. Whatever you develop is yours. And the opposite extreme of the libertarian view is a socialist or a communist view that you own nothing. It all belongs to the community or all belongs to government. Now, really, these two bipolar opposites are not the only options. So even in free market societies, there are certain regulations that go exactly to this point. So let's take the example of antitrust. Now you go back 100 years when Standard Oil Company was broken up because it had become the dominant oil supplier, monopoly oil supplier, and was extorting extortionate rates of revenues because it was the only supplier. Now they had that argument that, look, we've developed these oil wells. These are our oil wells. You can't just take them away. But a free market requires competition. And so that was one example. Let me give another example, two more examples. So in the 1980s, starting in the United States, telecom monopolies were broken up. In the US, AT&T had become the monopoly telephone operators for both local telephony as well as long distance telephony. This was pre-internet. And they had invested and built the entire infrastructure across the US. And again, the same argument was used that a free market economy cannot have monopolies. And so that was broken up. Recently, a few years ago, we had a similar issue with net neutrality. Now, in net neutrality, cable companies and telecom companies said, we have built the pipes, we have laid the fiber, and that's why we must have exclusive access to the customer because we have invested in this. And in exactly the same vein, the consensus emerged that, look, yes, you've built the fiber, you've got the pipes, but that should not give you a monopoly access to the customer. And you have to provide equal access to other content providers on the same pipe. Now, this goes to exactly that kind of issue. So when a large company has invested millions, maybe billions of dollars and collected data, certainly they have some right to it. And especially when they have processed it, especially when they've sliced and diced it and they can monetize it. But the raw data, if just because they've collected it, if they say that we must have sole access to this raw data of all the customers or all citizens, then it creates a monopolistic situation. And so one commentator has recently said that what the Gopalakrishnan committee has suggested is like communism, it nationalizes data. Again, I think that's a wrong way of looking at it because it's not an either or. Free market societies do have regulations to allow access so that there is competition. And this falls into that kind of parameter.
Great. I'm so thankful that you brought in the idea of antitrust because that was going to be my next question, which is if the non-personal data committee report also says that, market power is heavily skewed in favor of big tech and therefore we need a regulation like non-personal data. But if the main problem that we are trying to solve is of competition, do you think the Competition Commission of India, which is the body which is looking at market power, be looking at this? Or do you think that a separate regulatory authority such as the NPDA would be able to look at this? Because data is one of the, factors of production, if you call it that, which makes somebody an incumbent power in a market.
Yes, so this I think is a great question. Now, I gave you three examples of antitrust rulings. One was the oil companies 100 years ago. One was telecom companies 30, 40 years ago. And recently, 3-4 years ago, net neutrality. Now, in the first two cases, it was only competition laws or competition commission that went into play in the case of oil and in the case of telecoms. But when it came to net neutrality, the same argument, the question that you have posed was raised, but generally the consensus evolved that it would be the authority that deals with data access that will deal with this. So for example, in the US, it was the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, that took the call. And in India, it was TRAI. It was not the communications company. Now, the Communications Commission. Now, the reason is the technology is moving so fast that perhaps there is an argument to be made that it may be difficult for people to understand all the issues. Now, a competition commission is schooled in the classic case of competition and lack of, not allowing monopolies and so on and so forth. But when technology changes so rapidly that something decided this year may be out of, maybe totally irrelevant in a year or 2 years. So you have seen that there is a little bit of overlap in this case between antitrust, anti-competition regulations and technology regulations. I think there can be a special case made for technology to be regulated with, this kind of overlap is actually quite natural, simply because of the extremely rapidly changing nature of technology.
And another sort of related point to that is, as you mentioned, that there might be a special regulator required or a separate regulator looking at these issues. But a lot of experts are also saying, and I'm going to push you a little bit on the point of raw data versus processed data. A lot of tech companies are also saying that no data is actually raw data, right? Because the kind of data that they capture makes a lot of difference to their business models. For example, if it's an e-commerce company, if they are capturing how a customer is moving from one page to another, how are they searching for a particular product? If it's a cab aggregator, then how does the search pricing work? So every different company in consumer tech economy is looking at very different metrics and to be able to capture that data and to use to build their product. So do you think there can be a standard for what non-personal data is and what is raw for which industry and what is processed for which industry? Who will decide that?
Again, a great question. Now, Aparajita, as you know, I come from a private sector background, and yes, I'm extremely in favor of free markets. But I'm not in favor of free markets to the extent that allows competition. For free markets to function, you must have competition. So the point that you've made is the same point that has been made again and again, whether it is oil, whether it is telecom, and whether it is data. Now, of course, there is such a thing as raw data. Everything that you just explained was the slicing and dicing and the processing of it that the companies are claiming to have a right on, and they're legitimately so. Now, raw data can simply mean location. Location is simply raw data. Now, it may not give any other aspect about the person, may not give any aspect about the person's income or the kind of things she likes to eat or buy. Simply by having location, you can know where there is a population, where there is not a population. That's one. I'm just using a very simplistic example, but I agree with you. This is not easily settled because, as I said, we are at the cutting edge of this. Now, the Europeans have come up with a reference to non-personal data just recently, I think a year or two ago, but they have not taken it forward either. So I think the Gopalakrishnan Committee serves a purpose in helping to take the discussion forward by putting forward certain ideas about what is non-personal data, about whether it can truly be private, is the anonymity irreversible, who owns community data. So I think India has done a great job. This Gopalakrishnan Committee has done a great job in taking the dialogue to the next level. And these issues are not settled. And I think we should be proud that we are at a level today in terms of scale, in terms of discussing the latest cutting edge technology issues, that India is actually setting the tenor, if you will. But as I said, this will be debated in the US, in Europe, in other countries, and it's not going to get settled this year or the next year.
Definitely. I think the world is looking at us at, what we are trying to do with this regulation here. And I think it's going to lead to a lot of debate in other countries as well. And that was actually one of the things that I wanted to ask you. If we were to go down that road, and if India is the sort of front runner in bringing out a regulation like this, which asks big tech to mandatorily share raw data with startups in India, do you think there will be any implications for us in terms of our foreign affairs and trade relations with other countries?
It'll depend on how the rest of the world goes forward. But I think the path we seem to be on seems to be rational because we are not saying that we are going to nationalize the data. We are not going to say that we are peremptorily going to seize data that is gathered by big companies. It's the, when big oil was broken up 100 years ago, it didn't stop the oil companies from investing further in new oil fields in new countries, even into India. When telecom was deregulated and broken up 30 years ago, it didn't stop telecom companies from coming to India. And when net neutrality was enforced in India, despite extreme lobbying by big tech, remember that. Big tech didn't walk away from India. It has continued. Let me give you an example. When the related issue is of privacy, and the Europeans were the first to make some big moves just a few years ago in the GDPR regulations. And just 4 or 5 years ago, when I was the first member of parliament in India to put up a bill for privacy and data security, big tech was screaming themselves hoarse that this is not going to work. It's going to squelch innovation. And just 4 years later, big tech is completely compatible with GDPR. And they've accepted that the privacy concerns are genuine. We have also had rulings by the Supreme Court, and we are in discussion about what our privacy data security laws should look like. So it's understandable because big tech has invested money in gathering the data, but I don't think it's just a simple thing to say that there is no such thing as raw data, there is no such thing as anonymity. I don't think it'll turn away investment in India at all.
And when it comes to privacy, do you think there are any privacy concerns related to anonymized data sets? For example, a lot of people contend that if you were to put anonymized data sets together, and the committee also refers to something as the community non-personal data. So any non-personal data relating to a specific community. Do you think there can be any privacy concerns regarding this as well? And if do you see that PDP bill and the Data Protection Authority as it is envisaged right now can actually come in conflict with this non-personal data authority at times because they are essentially trying to regulate probably the same data sets, but at different stages in the life cycle of a data set?
All right. So this is an argument that is being made, and this falls in the same category of arguments of when we were discussing about privacy, when we were discussing about Aadhaar few years ago, and there was a lot of fake news that Aadhaar data had been leaked, and there were certain activists who were saying that no, we can't have this kind of scrutiny. But the fact is, as a society, modern human beings have agreed not to live like 16th century hermits. We have agreed that there will be CCTV cameras in public to record whether you are violating traffic rules. We have agreed that there will be scanners in airport to check whether you are carrying weapons or explosives. And so we have agreed to make certain exceptions for privacy, for convenience. We give our privacy to Google Maps to trace where we are location-wise. Now, the Supreme Court ruled exactly in line with the bill that I had moved, where I said that we can't have 100% privacy in the same way that 16th century human had, but the exceptions must be extremely narrow and extremely specifically defined so that they are not abused. So now that brings me to the issue of, can anonymity be 100%? Now, yes, some people are saying that technology can come up that it will change anonymity, but if we are looking for an either or situation, if we are looking for a black and white situation, maybe nobody can guarantee you 100% privacy or anonymity, but they can certainly guarantee you 99.9999999%. So let me use an example. 30 years ago, this issue was also a concern. And remember the protocol PGP, pretty good privacy. Why was it called pretty good privacy? Now, it was I think initially it was a 128-bit encryption. Later on, it's become 256-bit encryption. Now the encryption standards are getting higher and higher, but also on the other side, supercomputers are coming up which can crunch the data much faster and break that level of encryption. So it's always a race. But I want to emphasize on the phrase pretty good privacy, because if we had insisted that it has to meet some cosmic standard of privacy, then we would never have had credit cards. then we would never have had internet transactions. We would never have had e-commerce. So I think we have to recognize that there is such a thing as anonymity that can be maintained for all practical purposes. And yes, there will be crooks and others always chasing a new tech to try and decrypt that privacy. And there will be privacy proponents who will be coming up with better and better ways of maintaining that anonymity. So to say that unless we have perfect, some kind of universal level of privacy, we should not progress is not reasonable, not rational. That's not how we function as human societies.
Great. I think a lot of people have a lot of things to say on our YouTube live chat. I was just checking it. So if it's okay, I'm going to audience questions now.
Okay, sure.
Can I go ahead with that? Okay, great. So Vijay Ramanathan, he's asking, what would be your suggestion on monetization of such raw data by big tech to an extent that they have an ROI for the effort spent? Though agreed that defining it would be a nightmare, he himself is saying. And add to that question, sorry, do you think there should be any legal constraints on using data that is shared by big tech for startups who they share it with, if this was to go through?
Okay, so let's this whole data economy came up consensually. It was not enforced government collection of data such as census. It came up consensually because we started sharing our data for convenience. The opposite of privacy is not some kind of big brother dictatorship. The opposite of privacy is convenience. And we have willingly, all the apps that we download, everybody says yes, yes, okay to the terms and conditions without even reading it. So we have willingly given that that consent, and now there are regulatory efforts on to ensure that the consent has to be reasonable. It should not be a 30-page document. It should be 5 or 10 yes or no questions that people should tick off. And so there is going to be regulations to ensure that consent is actually a reasonable parameter. Now, there is a new pushback when you said, and this goes to your question about whether the big tech should be allowed to monetize. Now, that's the free market economy. If you have a bugbear in your mind that why should somebody make profit, why should somebody make money out of this, then you're not talking about free market. You're talking about socialist, communist regimes, which have never created or innovated anything in history. All the innovations have come from free markets. Now, the monetization should be based on effort that they put in, should be based on new technologies or new proprietary formulas that they come up with, whether it is in medicine or whether it is in technology. The principle is the same. Now, this new pushback that we should own some of the data, there is some resonance to it, but I think the consent architecture is where that comes into play. Now, if we, it's possible that some big tech will come up with a formula that will pay you 1 cent out of every data that we collect, or X% out of every dollar that we make if we use your data in that data set. It's possible somebody will come up with that. Now, you can say that, look, I don't want to share my data, and you have the option not to. It becomes a little difficult not to use many of the modern technologies which are dependent on data sharing. So you have to accept that maybe you're not getting money for sharing your data, but you're getting certain facilities. Many people use Google Maps to run their small businesses. They're making money off it, which is a free service. So it goes both ways. So I think, as I said, there is no clear-cut answer today. It's going to shape up as things go along. But to say that somebody should not make money, I think the argument should be limited to somebody should not make money off raw data, which they're collecting, or even collecting has a cost. So maybe that is the amount of money they should make on raw data. But clearly, they ought to be allowed to add innovation and make money from that.
And the second part of the question, for example, if one big tech was sharing their data, for example, a cab aggregator, because that's committee's favorite example, so I'm using it again and again. If a cab aggregator is sharing their, for example, surge pricing related sort of data, and would there be, do you think there should be legal constraints on the startup that is getting that data on how they use it? or constraints around who can invest in that startup and who can acquire that startup if they have gotten that? Because how will we prevent misuse of this data sharing mechanism?
So I think we are getting a bit too far ahead of the argument here, because once you are requiring companies to make raw data available, you can't say that it will only go to startups, because that data will get leaked easily. So, if you're making it accessible, it has to be made accessible to others. And of course, there can be fee structures for that. There can be compensation for that. And I don't have a hard and fast answer on this. To what extent? Let's take the community of ride aggregators. And each one of them has collected some data. If somebody wants to start coming up and want access to those customers or those citizens with raw data, that's what we are talking about here, that the entire field of location-based monetization should not be limited to 2 or 3 companies. It should allow others, innovators, startups to come in on it. So I think the debate continues as to what is truly raw data. That's in your question. What is truly raw and what is processed is not a settled issue today. So in terms of search pricing, there are many other factors than just location. Search pricing in a upper middle class part of town will likely be different than a search pricing in a lower middle class or a poor part of town. So this is where the big tech company brings its own algorithms, its own technology and knowledge to play. So how we will define what is exactly raw. We just give the numbers of people available at a certain location without no other information. Is that raw? Is that not raw? Is something that we need to discuss and decide.
And I think there's some good news. The committee has just extended the deadline for public comments till 13 September. Somebody just pinged on the chat. So I think we have more time to discuss this. That's great. Nakul is asking, there are so many industries which are oligopolies, even in India, where there are 3-4 big players, just as we have in the tech industry. The government isn't interfering in those, and those are also important industries, then why tech?
There are certain natural oligopolies. For example, if you're talking, let me go back to the use of the oil field. It's a natural resource. And just because you allow competition, a new oil field will not pop up miraculously. The issue is, how do you level the playing field? See, obviously, it's no proponent of free markets is going to say that there should be a monopoly. And if you extend that formula further, it's not good to have an oligopoly of only 4 or 5 players either. You should have more players. The counter argument to that is that there is a certain size required. Telecom companies in India have said that we had too many telecom companies in the beginning. None of them could acquire scale. And so some of them have gone bankrupt. So there has to be a balance between scale and competition. Now, let's not forget the main issue here. The main issue here is not that you just redistribute what somebody has developed as a property, as an asset, as a wealth, but you provide access. We provide access on an equal footing. So whether you have developed the oil field or you have laid the fiber optics, whether new startups can provide their content on that. So I think the same oligopoly principle applies today. And I agree with the argument that if you have oligopolies in other sectors, we should be looking at creating access opportunities to startups and smaller and medium-sized companies in those areas.
And I think a related question has also come up, that apart from this regulation, what else do we need to do to fire up innovation startups? And yesterday we were discussing that in US, where big tech is prevalent, still a lot of innovative startups do keep coming up. California is still the hub of innovation. What is it that they are doing, even apart from this? They are not really facilitating this kind of data sharing, but what is it that they are doing right that we can also do to give that kind of chance to Indian startups? Because that seems to be the main aim of this entire regulation.
My own principle, my own feeling about this is a personal opinion, is that nothing succeeds like providing a level playing field. If you have, you try to regulate it, you can't become, in the 1950s, India was a larger producer of steel than China or Korea, and we regulated it for decades, and we fell far behind the others. You can't make things happen by regulation. Regulation have to be an enabler, not something that controls. So we are already doing a lot of, I think the single best thing we could do is to provide infrastructure. Nobody should have to struggle to get high-speed connectivity. One of the reasons Silicon Valley succeeds is they've had access to all kinds of infrastructure and knowledge. You've had great institutions in Silicon Valley that have come up with new technologies, new ideas, and this intermixing of startups and big companies and institutions, universities, it creates that sort of thing. So if you look at a macro level, our ease of doing business index matters. We've gone from 142 in the world to about 50 odd or 60. We need to be in the top 50. We need to be in the top 30. And we are on that trajectory. As we progress on that trajectory, you're going to see more and more. See, India has already become a very large hub for innovation in the world. Right. We have nearly 20 unicorns in the making. So I think we are doing something right. We just have to do more of it.
And I think there is a question that Vasant is asking on the chat, which is, I think, related to it. I think there is a little bit of a fear among industry that when it comes to data regulation, India is thinking of too many regulators. For example, there is the DPA that is already under discussion. Then there is this authority on non-personal data that has been proposed. There is also an e-commerce regulator that is in the works, which is also looking at the entire digital economy, not just e-commerce as we understand it normally. So I think Vasant is asking that, do you think that this will really increase the compliance costs on businesses, and will that thwart ease of doing business for this sector?
Again, a great question. I think we need to look at both sides of the coin. So both too many regulators overlapping with each other and too few regulators also can take a toll. So let me give you an example. The broadcast industry was crying out for regulation at least 20 years ago, because there were monopolies that were thrusting large bouquets of content without giving choice, individual choice, to consumers or to distributors. And I remember speaking about this in my first term as a member of parliament back in 2001 or 2002. And there was a lot of lobbying against having a broadcast regulator. And after a delay of more than a decade, the telecom regulator was given the additional job of broadcast regulations. Now, it took them many, many years before they could get their, their grip on it, because initially it was a very different thing. The broadcast industry was not streaming, it was not online, it was satellite television, and telecom was something different. So a lot of time was wasted, perhaps a dozen to 15 years, by not having a broadcast regulator. I think today that has been largely made up, because the telecom regulator has acquired knowledge and skills, and also broadcast has become part and parcel of telecom because of streaming business. So I think both sides are a matter of concern. So yes, I think we ought to be careful that you don't want far too many regulators with overlap and cross regulations impinging each other. Neither should you should also be wary that you end up having not enough regulators. I think that, I haven't, on this issue of whether e-commerce deserves a separate regulator, I haven't personally gone into the issue in great detail, but at first glance, it appears to me that e-commerce has become a huge giant by itself. Just the e-commerce part of new economy, of technology, is a huge giant. So perhaps it does require specialized regulators. I don't want to say that, no, it doesn't require. I want to look into it a bit more. But I think the question is appropriate. We need to find the right balance, not too many, not too few.
Great. I think the problem with e-commerce regulator, I think this person was saying, is that right now, the way it is defined, e-commerce is looking at the entire data economy. So I think that creates an almost equal, almost a perfect overlap with these regulators. I think that is something that needs to be probably.
So my own idea is that think of Venn diagrams. And
Right.
I think it is natural, I think it is reasonable and rational that you have different regulatory bodies with some overlap, minor overlap. But if they have, like you said, 100% overlap or even a 70% overlap, it's going to create chaos. So
Right.
we need to understand, is there a need for a different regulator for a particular subset of the tech economy? Each time we have to ask that question. Sometimes the answer should be yes. Sometimes the answer should be no, that another existing body can just as well handle this aspect of it. So we need to ask that question for each and every step.
Right. I think yesterday this panelist was saying that, tech companies are like shapeshifters. Today they will be a payment company. Tomorrow they'll be an e-commerce company. So I think when companies are shapeshifters, it becomes hard to sort of delineate their different functions. And I think that is why probably regulators are finding it hard to do that.
So this goes clearly to one of your early questions in this discussion, that does technology require separate regulations where competition can take care of it? Competition regulations can take care of it. And I think you've answered it just now, because technology is so fast moving, because they are shape shifting so much that it does require specialized attention.
That's that's obviously something that needs to be considered. There is another interesting question, and I think yesterday we had some chats around this, which was around, can the government take an incentive based approach instead of the mandatory sharing approach to boost this innovation system? And in terms of incentives, I think there was some discussion around, incentivizing big tech to probably have more R&D here, or tie-ups with higher education institutions, etc. Even looking at that part of the innovation economy, do you think there could be something there that we could do?
I think incentives ought to play a role, but I am a little skeptical whether incentives alone will take care of it. Let me use an analogy. This analogy is similar to self-regulation. Many industries, not just tech industries, many industries often lobby the government saying, look, don't have regulation, it'll stymie our industry, just leave it to us, we will self-regulate. Now, more often than not, you will find that the self-regulation is very superficial and it does not address many of the concerns, not just of consumers, but also of smaller players in the industry. There are often cartels, there are, it creates the lack of competition that we are all concerned about. So I think incentives should definitely play a role in it. But this goes to the core issue. Who does raw data belong to? Now, if we decide that whoever has collected it, it belongs to them, then surely we should have no regulations, only incentives should be there. But if we decide that no, even though you have invested in collecting the raw data doesn't belong to you, the processing, the innovation belongs to you. Just like the fiber optic that you have laid may belong to you, but you are required to give access to other content creators, then clearly incentives alone are not going to be adequate.
And I think there is this question that has just popped up, which sort of builds on it, is that while antitrust is an issue everywhere, why do you think other countries haven't gone down this path? What is stopping them from doing that? Is there?
So on the issue of sharing raw data, as I said, India is at the cutting edge. Other countries are also starting on that path. I mentioned earlier that the European Commission has mentioned the sharing of non-personal data. So, this whole thing started by, should government be able to use raw data for policy choices? So, over the past few years, big data has started playing an extremely important role. So I was fascinated when I first started reading about big data a few years ago, maybe 5-7 years ago, how Google Analytics can predict that a certain part of a city is likely to see more crime on a particular weekend. Or when there is a pandemic, big data analytics can give you early warnings that you need to have a containment zone in this part of town, but not in that part of town. So this is something that government legitimately ought to be interested in, legitimately ought to be concerned about. And this is where the thrust is coming. So other countries are indeed looking at the aspect that government does have a role in managing pandemics. Government does have a role in containing crime. And if big data is not just about e-commerce, if big data is not just about profiting and monetizing, it's also about making our lives better in a way that's harder to calculate, such as law and order, such as health. So, but the answer is other countries are doing it, other countries are dealing with it. It just so happens that, you know, in one of the first times in recent history, India is at the forefront of a regulation that matters to everybody in the world. That's why it looks so unusual. But I can assure you that in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years, you will be seeing similar debates all around the world.
In the meantime, though, is there a risk that we'll be seen as this overzealous country who's trying to, just get the maximum value out of the data? And is there any risk that you foresee that, that could actually defeat the purpose of going onto this path and being the first country on this path?
I think we should shed our inhibition about being a global leader. But we should also not let hubris get to us. I think we should be comfortable with the idea that we are a global leader. We are a technology leader for sure. We have the scale. How many countries have the scale that India has? And how many, there is an Estonia that you can say has technologically very advanced, but it's a small country. Then there are very large countries that don't have the technological edge that we have. So we are in almost a unique position, I would say. So I think it is relevant, it is rational, reasonable, and it is correct for us to start helping to shape the global dialogue and global regulations concerning this. But I agree with you, we should not get carried away by hubris that we know best, we should not listen to anybody. I don't agree with that. I think we should listen to all stakeholders, which we are doing. We are listening to big tech, we are listening to startups, we are listening to policy mavens such as yourself. We are listening to people who are concerned and interested citizens, like those who are participating in this webinar. Government certainly has a stake, as I explained earlier, about managing data analytics for the betterment of its people. We have, and I always believe that regulation must be light touch regulation. Regulation must not be so overbearing that it totally stymies innovation. So again, let me repeat something I said earlier. The regulation, the antitrust regulation of oil industry did not stop oil investment in India. The telecom breakups did not prevent telecom investment in India. If we do it right, this is not going to hurt the Indian economy. It is going to help the Indian economy dramatically by boosting much more innovation, many more startups who become unicorns, and government ability to manage policy, data-driven management of policy. So we have to do it right, but to not do it would also be wrong.
Great. I think that's a very balanced approach. And I think that brings us to our last question. And I think it's more around process, since you mentioned that, we are listening to all stakeholders and, it's an open consultation. Everybody's willing to give their views. What do you think? So this committee report obviously has proposed a legislation, and then the legislation has its own process. But from here on, what path do you think India should take, given that this is happening in a global context? There is obviously domestic consultation that is on, and other countries are looking at different aspects of this problem in very different ways. So what do you think, where do we go from here? And what will be a good sort of timeline to, come at a conclusion? Should PDP bill be passed first? Should PDP bill even mention non-personal data? If you could just talk to us about.
All right. So I think what we are doing is broadly the right thing, because we are an open society. We are having open discussions like this. We are having editorials. We are having op-eds. We have many views coming up. Some of them are extreme views saying that there is no such thing as raw data. Some on the other side, that you should have no ownership of any data that you collect. And I think it's the right thing that we are trying to find the optimal solution, that we don't want to affect innovation. We certainly don't want to penalize those who have invested in bringing the data economy to such scale in India, but neither do we want to penalize startups and others who need a level playing field to have access to those consumers and those citizens. I think to go forward, we should keep one eye on what the rest of the world is doing. As I said, the Europeans have mentioned this. They have not gone as far as we have gone in trying to describe what is definitions and who owns raw data, etc. But they will come up. So will there be a movement in America about raw data and ownership. We should keep an eye on what other large innovative jurisdictions are doing. And we should also keep having these hearings, but we can't have them interminably. We have to start taking decisions at some point. So let's not try to get everything perfect. The perfect is the enemy of the good. If we have a reasonable degree of consensus on what is good for the country, what is good for the economy, what is rational and balances the various interests of the various stakeholders, then we should start going ahead with legislation. These legislations have been in discussion for at least 3 to 4 years. My bill on privacy and data security is already 4 years old. Let's not, we are not legislating for the next 1,000 years. When we make a legislation, I'm sure there will be some stumbles, and we can, as we go along, we will fill in the loopholes and the gaps, and we can later on aim for more comprehensive legislation, maybe a few years into the coming decade. But we can't wait forever, that until we get every T crossed and every I dotted, that we should not progress, because that is what will truly stymie innovation in India.
And I think as society, law is also work in progress always. So especially with technology. So I think, thank you so much, Mr. Panda. I think this was a really interesting discussion. I think this is a topic that, everybody is watching, given that most of our country, when it comes to service class, is working in this sector. They're working with data day in and day out. This is something that is extremely, extremely relevant to us as an economy, as a society. And I think, as you laid out, that, we are really the front runners who are thinking about this question. But I think there are a lot of complicated answers that we need to have before we actually get into the nitty-gritties of, instituting such a system. I think we are all looking forward to the PDP bill coming to the parliament when the parliament is able to function, pandemic permitting. So I think some of these discussions will also happen in the parliament, because this is also mentioned in the PDP bill, at least in the 2019 version. So we look forward to, what's in store for us. Thank you so much. Any closing remarks for everybody who's watching?
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I think the questions, both from you and from some of the participants of the webinar, were very pertinent. They go to the core of the issue, the heart of the issue. I don't think I have anything other to add. I'll just reiterate that let's not be inhibited about the role that we are now playing because of the scale and because of the level of technology, or the where on the curve we have reached. The world is looking up to us. We should not hesitate in helping create the new dialogue and the new regulations, but we should not get carried away by hubris.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Panda. Thank you. This for everybody watching, this will be available on YouTube on the Prints channel, and we will send the link to everybody who registered for being a part of this discussion as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Namaskar.